everybody, and welcome back to Life in the Cosmos with me, Riley Adair. Today, I am going to teach you the basics. I'm going to teach you how to read your birth chart, taking you through the planets, the houses, the signs. And at this point, you may be wondering, what does that even mean? Well, good news, you're going to find out today. So, before we get into the nitty-gritty details, you may be wondering, what is a birth chart? And that's a good question. A birth chart is a snapshot of where the planets were at the time that you were born. So, what can this tell us? According to modern astrology, our birth chart can show a lot about our personality and psychological characteristics and strengths and weaknesses that we may have. In ancient astrology, it tells you, your birth chart tells you a lot about the people in your life, the events of your life, the different spheres of your life, and most importantly, the events that are going to be taking place and what people will play a role in those events. So that sounds very vague, but as we get into it, you're going to understand more what I mean. Today, I'm going to be using a mix of modern and ancient astrology. I think it's great to use both because I think it's so positive to use astrology as a tool for self-reflection, to think about your characteristics as a whole and who you are and what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. I find astrology makes me look at myself a little bit more clearly and without a level of like shame. Like I can look at my weaknesses and not get so bogged down by them. But I also think astrology is so much more potent when we're able to see the events that have taken place in our lives and how that shows up in our birth chart. I find there's something so healing and reassuring about being able to see the most positive things in your life that are promised to you and to see the things that you've probably had hardships with. So, your birth chart will really show you all of that. So, before we start, I encourage everyone to follow along by beginning to open up your own birth chart. So go to www.astroseek.com or type in Google AstroSeek birth chart. Type in your birth date, your location, and if you're lucky enough to know the time that you were born, please put in the time that you're born. I cannot emphasize enough how much an accurate birth time makes such a big difference. However, I know that's not a privilege that everyone has. So if you can just look at the time that you think you were born, the time your mom says you were born, and then have some thoughts about as we're going through today and looking at everything, just ask yourself, does this resonate with you? And if it doesn't, I guarantee it probably means that your birth time is wrong because astrology can be scarily accurate. Okay, so when you're in AstroSeek and you're typing in your birth chart info, in the extended settings at the very bottom, go to put in whole sign houses. The default setting is Placidus. I use whole sign, so just for ease, just follow along with me and use whole sign, and then you can change your mind later on. When you pull up your own birth chart, what I want you to look for is this line that goes across the wheel here. It has ASC and DSC. So you're going to look for the ASC. What is the ASC? That is your ascendant. That is your rising sign. So you're going to look at what sign the ascendant is in. If you don't know the symbols, don't worry. You can scroll down. AstroSeek has a little blurb about everything. So for me, I'm a Gemini rising. So what is a rising sign and why does that matter? The rising sign is called the helm. This is the place where you steer the ship of your life. This is your outward identity, your appearance, your way of moving through the world. So some people will call this like your space suit that you put on every day. And this is the person that the person at the gas station meets. This is the person that people in your school meet. This is the outward facing appearance of you. So your rising sign can tell you a lot about your inherent strengths and weaknesses. So let's go through some of the rising signs. So if you're a Gemini rising, part of your life's purpose, if we'll say, will be to communicate. Gemini risings are quick and witty and great conversationalists, and they often have like sharper eyes and sharper features. I find Virgo risings are also like that. They have very like sharp features, like smaller eyes, and they usually look like pretty young. Scorpio risings often have a very intense stare. They seem to pierce right through people and are able to look people right into their soul. Scorpio risings have this underlying theme of transformation that seems to show up in their life. And they transform themselves, they help other people heal and transform, and they go through so many different iterations. If you're ruled by Saturn, so if you're an Aquarius rising or a Capricorn rising, who may be, especially when you're younger, like lanky, skinny, prone to depression and scarcity thinking. This can also, Saturn rising, people who are ruled by Saturn, so Capricorn and Aquarius risings, their life might be a little bit harder before the age of 30, whether that's like your mental well-being or just the circumstances that you're born into. You may have felt like you had to grow up much earlier than other people your age, and for whatever reason, you were given more responsibility. So, part of your mission in life, let's say if you're a Capricorn rising, would be to obtain some level of security, whether that's financial security or emotional security, but often it does have something to do with like the tangible worlds. And if you're an Aquarius rising, maybe part of your mission is to be a forward thinker, to be innovative. You know, you're always stepping to the beat of your own drum. You are doing things your own way. And God forbid anyone ever tell you what to do, because that's not going to work well. If you're ruled by Venus, so if you're a Taurus or Libra rising, part of your life's mission will be perhaps to be creative. Uh, People who are ruled by Venus are often extremely, extremely beautiful. So y'all are lucky. Y'all are lucky. You're the pretty ones. So Venus loves art, loves beauty, loves fashion. In Taurus, that love for beauty can manifest as a love for the physical world, for nature, for flowers, for gardening, for really grounding into reality. Taurus risings are often very committed to something. Once they start something, they're not going to give it up because it's a fixed rising sign. So they're going to keep moving, keep pushing, keep going forward until they get what they want. Libra risings are ruled by air. So they're more mental, like it's more fashion and art and thing and poetry and things that are on the wall. So it's more of a mental beauty, appreciation for the beauty that we create with our minds. Whereas like Taurus is a beauty that's either naturally present or created with our hands. So if you are ruled by Mars, so if you're a Scorpio rising or Aries rising, we talked about Scorpio rising a little bit already, but Aries rising, very impatient and driven, and you speak your mind and you go after what you want, and you may just be both Aries and Scorpio maybe naturally like have more of an athletic build. Mars is the athlete of the zodiac. So you may tone your muscles very easily. Like you may have a very powerful presence that people immediately can feel. This can also extend, so your rising sign, it can also end up impacting your life direction in the sense that like Joe Rogan is a Gemini rising and he is a podcast host, right? Like his whole life is about communication. Whereas someone with a Pisces or Sagittarius rising ruled by Jupiter, maybe their part of their life's purpose is to go into the realm of philosophy and higher learning and thought. Pisces risings may lean into art and spirituality and healing professions, and risings may end up being professors or lifelong students, or they go and they live abroad, anything where they're getting out of their comfort zone into a new realm. Sagittarius risings can sometimes, well, actually, Sagittarius and Pisces risings can sometimes put on a little bit of weight because Jupiter is the planet of luck and abundance and expansion. So, if you're ruled by Jupiter, it can be hard to know when to rein it back sometimes. Of course, there's so many other things that can take place, like that can affect everything else in your birth chart, but just some things, because the rising sign really can say a lot about your appearance. Let's say, for example, if you're a Cancer risings I've noticed always have these round faces with big eyes, and they might wear a lot of silver. And if they're women, some of them will have like very large breasts because Cancer rules the breasts. And Cancer risings may take some time before they decided like that they feel safe enough to open up. They have to feel their environment before they can really be themselves or choose to be there. Cancer risings often have a really strong attachment to their home and to food. So, taking that example of your rising sign ending up having to do something with your life direction, I know a lot of Cancer risings who are chefs. This is such a classic, like, Cancer rising profession. If you're a Leo rising, you're ruled by the sun. You're naturally warm and magnetic, and people are drawn to you, and you're creative. And depending on, the type of Leo you are, maybe you're extremely self-involved, or maybe you're self-involved enough to have pride and to know who you are and to know how you walk in this world. There's so many mitigations and different factors, but Leo risings will often have just an amazing sense of style because they're so creative. And they often are characterized by having like big hair and, Leo like the lion, right? So I find Leo risings carry themselves with this sense of regalness. Because if Cancer or the moon is the queen of the zodiac, Leo is the king. Leo is the sun that everything else revolves around. So that's your rising sign. And I've touched on this a little bit, but the ruler of your rising sign tells a lot about your overall self and your life direction. And so let's go through the rulers really quickly in case you didn't pick it up. So let's start with the sun. The sun rules Leo. The moon rules Cancer. Taurus, or sorry, Venus rules Taurus and Libra. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. Jupiter rules Pisces and Sagittarius. Capricorn rules Saturn and Aquarius. Mars rules Scorpio and Aries. So, what you're going to do is you're going to look for the ruler of your rising sign and you're going to look at where it falls in your chart. For me, I'm a Gemini rising. So, I'm going to look at where Mercury is in my chart. I know the symbols, but if some of you don't worry. You can just look for where Mercury is. Just scroll down, you'll see it. So Mercury for me is in the fifth house of Libra. So when you're looking at where the ruling planet is in your chart, that's going to tell you a lot about major themes that will be very important for you in your life. Wherever the ruler of your rising sign is, it will give that type of characteristic to your overall identity. So, like, let's say my Mercury, which is my ruling planet, is in Libra. Well, my outer identity is going to be influenced with Libran type qualities. Like, Libra qualities are a love for fashion and art and beauty and poetry and aesthetics. Very simple. So, if your rising sign tells you about your outer persona, where your rising sign is placed and what zodiac sign it's placed in is kind of giving that a little bit of extra pizzazz. A Gemini rising with an Aries, like with the Mercury and Aries, would be totally different from me with my Mercury in Libra. That would give someone more of an impulsive and brash and quick to shoot type of personality. So we're already seeing that there's a reason why people of different that have the same sun sign are totally different from each other because you actually have so many planets in your chart. So let's get into them. This little part of the chart that has your ascendant is the only part of your chart that actually represents you. Everything else represents other people in your life, different spheres of your life. Your birth chart is divided into 12 parts. Where your rising sign is sets the first house. So if you're a Gemini rising, Gemini rules your first house. If you're a Leo rising, Leo rules your first house. If you're a Libra rising, Libra rules your first house. So let's go through them. And as I'm going through what these different houses mean and what areas of your life they represent, I want you to look at your birth chart and I want you to look at where you have a large collection of planets. Any house that has three or more planets means that you have a stellium in that sign. So it means that that area of your life is going to be extra important and have an extra emphasis put on it. So let's go through the different houses. And so you can kind of get a beginning picture of what areas of life are going to hold major importance for you. If there is no planets in that house, it doesn't mean that that area of your life isn't important. So just know that. So your first house is the helm. So that's your rising sign. We've already spoken about that. So that's your body, your identity, your life, your appearance. The second house is called the gate of Hades. So that represents your values, your relationship to yourself. So I always see the second house as like your ego. The second house rules finances, income, possessions. So, how you make money and what you own and what you care to own, what you value. If you are an entrepreneur and you make your own income, do it from your own business, you might have planets in your second house. The third house is the place of the goddess. It is the joy, the place of the moon. So if your moon is in the third house, congratulations, she's in her joy here. So the third house represents your siblings, your extended family, your neighborhood, like literally your neighbors, the places that you walk around, your, coffee shop that you love to go to. It also represents movement. So dancing, driving, biking, any type of movement activity. People with a lot of planets in the third house, they often end up, being really into cars or being dancers, or the third house also represents short trips and messages. So writers have, major third house placements. The third house has a lot to do with communication. Anything that gets a message from one person to the other. The fourth house is called the subterranean place. It represents hidden things. So hidden things like death, hidden things like your home life, your private life, the things that people don't see unless they are really in your closest sphere. The fourth house also represents your parents and your place of origin, where you grew up, your lineage. So people with a lot of fourth house placements, they may be very obsessed with their genealogy, trying to figure out where they come from, or for whatever reason, their ancestors play more of a major role within their life. But the fourth house representing your home where you laid your head to rest, your parents, and your place and family of origin. The fifth house is the place of good fortune. So it represents sex in the name of like procreation, like sex is in like fun, light, flirty sex. Dating, it represents children, pleasure, and creativity. So anything, because it represents offspring, it can be like an actual child, an actual baby, but it can also represent like business ventures or creative projects that end up becoming your kids. The sixth house is a place of bad fortune. So this is where illnesses are. This is where cripples are. It sounds so crazy to say cripples, but it is like it ends up becoming very literal at times. Like Frida Kahlo had some six house placements, and she ended up quite literally being like confined to her bed. The sixth house also represents quadrupeds, animals. Um, it represents your health and your body and anyone who works below you, subordinates. In ancient astrology, they'd put slaves here, but we're not trying to do all that anymore. So it's your subordinates. The seventh house is the setting place. So it's right across from your rising sign. The seventh house represents your marriage partner, your one-on-one closest relationships. This is like the type of relationship where you've moved in together, or this is like your best friend that you hang out with like one-on-one all the time. It represents, if the first house is you, the seventh house is the other. The eighth house is the idle place or the inactive place. It represents death. So you'll see that death is in two places here. In modern astrology, the eighth house is the only house really associated with death, but in ancient astrology, the fourth house is associated with death as well. And I have reasons to believe that they can both represent this. I kind of see the eighth house as sometimes like death of other people, and the fourth house is like your own death. But we'll leave that discussion for another day. So the eighth house also represents the inheritances that you receive from other people, whether that's other people's money. So people with eighth house placements often end up working as investment bankers or, anything where they're dealing with other people's money day in and day out. Gold diggers would be here. Um, Anyone who's received any type of inheritance. Now, this can be fiscally, so like money, but this could also be the things that you inherit from your parents, like generational trauma, generational ways of thinking and perceiving, and that you may have to work through. The ninth house is the place of God. So this is the place of higher learning, higher education, foreign travels. So the third house represents short-term trips, like weekend trips, hour-long trips in the car. The ninth house represents the type of travel where you're going on a long voyage. You are going somewhere for a year, immersing yourself in a new country and a new way of life and learning something. It represents philosophy as well. The ninth house would also be like the place of astrology. A lot of astrologers have prominent placements in their ninth house. The 10th house is called the midheaven. It's where your career is, your reputation, your public face. So anything that changes how the public perceives you, whether you're married or single, whether you're a parent or not a parent. It also often represents the parent that was your primary caregiver. So for a lot of people, that was the mom, but that's not true for everyone. And so often it's the 10th house is the mother and the fourth house is the father, but that does change. I really think it just depends on your relationship with your parents, or even, if your parents didn't raise you, you could actually definitely see that between the fourth and the 10th house, or, if it was like your grandparents that raised you. So the 10th house is your public face. The 11th house is the place of good fortune. So this is like community, friends, networks, alliances, the place of hopes and dreams. What do you wish to come into fruition in this life? What do you hope for? What do you long for? And because the 11th house has to do with community and networks, this is where I'd place the internet. Any internet communities you're in, places where large groups of people come to congregate. The 12th house is the place of bad spirit. So this is the house of isolation, loss, confinement, hospitals, prisons, any place where you are going and being confined and sequestered away from the rest of society. The 12th house can be the place of self-undoing. It's the place where we actually are our own worst enemy and where we're kind of actively working against ourselves. If I think of the sixth house as the health of the body, the 12th house is the health of the spirit and the mind and the subconscious. But I just don't want you guys to worry. If you have a bunch of planets in the sixth house and the 12th house, it doesn't mean the worst possible scenario. Everything is on a sliding scale. So what I want you to do now is you've already found your ruling planet and what part of the chart it's in. So I want you to look now at the significations that I've listed here because wherever the ruling planet of your rising sign is, what part of the chart it's in and what house it's in is going to show you the themes that are going to be probably the most important in your life. Again, there's always mitigations. But let's say you're a Gemini rising and Mercury is in the fifth house. Well, dating and creativity is going to be a driving force in your life. If you're a Scorpio rising and Mars is in the 10th house, your life may be about your career. You may be married to your career. You may have a very strong relationship with the parent that nurtured you, and that relationship could shape a lot of your life. If you are a Leo rising and the sun is in the third house, well, maybe a huge part of your life is working with cars or working in communication or working in publishing or writing, or your siblings and your extended family play a huge role in your life.
I hope you catch kind of what I'm putting down here.
If the ruling planet of your rising sign is in the 6th or 12th house, so places that are typically considered bad or considered more challenging, please don't fret. It doesn't mean your life is going down the drain. It doesn't mean that you'll never be happy. It doesn't mean that you're like destined for a life of illness or being a cripple. There are so many other placements to consider to really analyze the overall fortune of your life. But I kind of want to, like, let's say you're a Pisces rising, so your ruling planet is Jupiter, and Jupiter's in your sixth house. So the sixth house, because it has something to do with health and, the physical body and everyday routines, this could mean that you end up being a yoga teacher because you're so connected to the body and you're so connected to your everyday routines. Or maybe you work in a hospital because the sixth house is the place of like illness. If your ruling planet is in the 12th house, maybe sometimes you're the one actively working against yourself. Maybe you're the cause of your own issues most of the time. Or maybe time alone and time spent in solitude and time spent in like contemplating like your spirit and your consciousness is what really fuels you. And, or even like I would say, walking like a religious path or like, going to a Buddhist monastery, any place where you're being sequestered for a long period of time. And I'll give you a positive one. Galileo had a bunch of planets in the 12th house, and he ended up doing some of his greatest works while he was under house arrest. So let's go through some of the planets now and discuss like what they mean for you and for your life. So let's start with we've already done the rising sign, super important. So now let's go to the sun sign. Everyone knows, I feel like everyone knows the sun sign. It's the sign that it's where the sun was at the time of your birth. So the sun represents your consciousness, your life's work, and your spirit. Because the sun represents your life's work, one thing that I have found to be almost fail proof is that where the sun is and what house it's in often tells you a lot about your career. I find like whenever I have people sit down for readings, if their sun is in Taurus in the fourth house, like out Taurus being an earth sign and the fourth house having connections to do with land, they're probably a farmer or they have a real estate agent or like something along those lines, a gardener, whatever. The sun sign is said to represent who you're meant to become in this lifetime. So you may find that in your earlier life, you may take on some of the characteristics of more of like your moon sign, which is your internal nature. And your sun sign is as you age and as you get older, you may find you become more and more like your sun sign. So if you don't resonate with your sun sign, you may end up resonating with it as you grow older. The moon sign represents your internal worlds, what it's like being you, what it's like living from your own perspective. Your moon sign represents your emotional nature. How do you deal with emotions? Do you intellectualize your emotions? Do you feel them so deeply and then cry about them? Do you suppress them? Do you barely even have any? The moon sign shows what it's like to live from your own perspective. It also shows a lot about your relationship to your mother and your relationship to your body and to nourishment overall. If the sun represents what you value and what you're here to become, and let's say it's the framework of who you are, the moon is all the filling. It's everything inside. It's what's happening truly for you and going on inside of you. So your rising sign is the spacesuit. It's the part that every single person sees. Your sun sign is your values and the framework of who you are. Your moon sign is the part that not everyone gets to see except for the people that are closest to you. With all of these, what you can do is you can look at the element that these signs are in. So, fire signs, which are Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, are often very quick and intuitive. There's a very strong intuition with fire signs. There is a level of impulsivity and a desire to like get up and go. And fire signs are can be like brash and boisterous and they it's the spark that like moves through the world. And fire signs are often so warm, quite literally. If you're a water sign, so Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio, you live in the watery realm. So you live in the emotional realm. So like let's say if your moon is in a water sign, your emotional world is extremely emotional. Like you can cry and feel deeply and also have a strong intuition, but there is such a depth to your feeling. There is, and I find that watery people with dominant water signs, they often need other water signs to be around them because that level of emotion isn't going to be understood by everybody. So if you're an earth sign or have a lot of earth placements, you're going to be very concerned with the tangible, practical matters of life. So the earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. Earth signs are, their feet are in the ground and their head is not up in the clouds. They are rooted firmly where they are. So this can be amazing. This is why water signs and earth signs often get along because earth signs will create the container and water will like fill the container and bring everything to life. And so because water so
Powerful, but doesn't know where to stop and start, Earth can give it structure.
if you are have a lot of air planets, so Gemini, Aquarius, or Libra, there is a strong level of a desire for intellectual connection. If you have an air moon, so like a Libra moon or a Gemini moon or an Aquarius moon, your feelings, you may intellectualize your feelings to the extreme. You're the type of person that goes to your therapist and is like, well, I've thought about this, this, and this, and this, and this is how it is. And then your therapist is like, can you please just feel what you feel? And that's going to make you probably very uncomfortable. Can you please just sit in your actual feelings? So air signs need that mental stimulation. They need that like creative spark of like pushing their mind to new limits. Chances are you probably have a little bit of everything, or you're dominant in one, or you're dominant in a couple. So that's a good place to start. Look at your planets and are you heavy on the earth? Are you heavy on the water? Are you heavy on the fire? And then we can begin to know a little bit more about you and your personality. The another way that you can split the signs up to kind of understand them a little bit more is by quadruplicity or modality would be an easier word to say. If you are a Aquarius, Leo, Scorpio, or Taurus. That's a fixed modality. So, what does that mean? It means that when you want something, nothing, nothing is going to stop you from getting that thing. You are going to work your tail off until you get to where you want to go. When you love someone, you are holding on. There is no letting go. Okay. There is like, we are here and we're here for the long haul. We are holding on. If you are a Libra, Capricorn, Aries, or Cancer, you are a cardinal sign. So, cardinal signs are the leaders of the zodiac. They are like, this is what we are doing. This is the vision. Everyone else can execute it. This is the trend. I'm setting the trend. So that's why I always think like Libras often have amazing style and they're often trendsetters. Think Bella Hadid, Kim Kardashian, like they are setting the trends. They are setting the way that things go. So cardinal signs will initiate a project. The fixed signs will actually follow through and they will actually make sure it gets done. Because cardinal signs will probably they're really interested in like leading the charge, but they're not gonna try to stick around for the actual charge. If you are a Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius, Virgo, you are a mutable sign. So, mutable signs have this amazing ability to go with the flow. They're not going to get too stuck in one way or too stuck in another way. Mutable signs often represent two of something. So if you have a lot of mutable signs, look at what area of your chart that's in and see if you have two of something. So like let's say if you have Sagittarius ruling your seventh house, maybe you have two marriages. If you have a mutable sign ruling your first house, maybe you're a twin. Maybe if you have a mutable sign ruling your fifth house, maybe you have two kids. If you have a, Gemini ruling your 10th house, maybe you have two careers. But to be fair, it's Gemini, so maybe you have more. But the way that we can think about this is through the seasons. So cardinal signs always rule the beginning of the season. Aries is the beginning of spring. Libra is the beginning of fall. So they're leading the charge. The fixed signs are the actual full extent of the season itself. So Scorpio is fall. Taurus is spring. Aquarius is winter. The mutable signs are a little bit of both. They are where the changeover occurs. So Virgo rules, the Virgo's mutable and it's at the end of summer, right before we get into fall, at least if you're in the northern hemisphere. Gemini is we've gone through spring and now we're moving into summer. So you can take these elements and these modalities, and already just from there, if you can locate your primary element and your primary modality, you're getting a really great insight into your psyche and into your ways of being. I do find that mutable signs have this incredible ability to not get too stuck on anything and they are open to changing and they're very adaptable, which is so far removed from fixed signs. Definitely have some fixed placements in my chart. I always just really admire that about them. So, what I've introduced you to is your sun, moon, and rising. Take a look at those, see the element and the modality, and ask yourself if it resonates with you. Like, does your outer appearance, so your rising sign, do you come across as very adaptable because you're a Gemini rising? But in truth, you're actually quite stubborn and rigid because your heart and your sun is ruled by a fixed sign. So, like having your moon in Scorpio and your sun in Taurus. Or are you an Aries rising? Are you a natural born leader with like a lot of zest and passion and just an insane level of intuition? But then your heart is in a watery sign of Pisces and you actually can go with the flow a little bit more. But because none of your signs are fixed, you lack the ability to follow through. So the next thing that we're going to do is I want you to look for your sun. And I want you to tell me, is it in the top half of the chart? So from the seventh house to the 12th house, or is it in the bottom half of the chart? Is your sun above the degree of your ascendant? Because if it is, it means that you were born during the day. You're a daytime baby. This means that you're going to be probably more connected to your sun sign. And it means that the planet Mars is going to be represent the areas in life where you're going to have the largest challenges. And the planet Jupiter is going to represent the areas in life where you have the greatest gifts. So look at where Mars and Jupiter are in your chart if you're born during the day, and you'll see great areas of great gifts and areas of great challenges. If your sun is underneath the horizon, so that means you're below the degree of the ascendant from the first to the sixth house, you're born at night. For nighttime babies, you may actually resonate more with your moon sign because the moon was a luminary at the time that you were born. This means that Venus, the planet of love and beauty, is going to give you the greatest blessings in your life. So look at where Venus is in your chart, look at what house Venus is in your chart, and look at areas where you're blessed. Saturn is going to be the planet of limits and restrictions, and that is the area where you're going to have the most challenges, where things are not going to come easily to you. What this is called sect. Sect is basically a fancy word for day or night charts. And this is a really amazing interpretive principle because we're getting a little bit more fine tuning here into realizing like areas where things are going to be a little bit more challenging and things are or where things are going to come a little bit more easily. So already we're kind of getting a little bit more texture as we look at your birth chart. Let's start with Mars. If you are born during the day, Mars is going to be the most challenging planet for you. If you're born at night, Mars is going to represent surmountable challenges. On a psychological level, Mars is going to represent how you drive after what you want. The house that it's in is going to tell you what is it that you want? Where are you putting that energy into? Where are you using that drive to get what you want? And the sign, so the zodiac sign, is going to show you how you go about getting what you want. Are you impulsive? Is your Mars in Aries? Or are you very strategic and calculated? Is your Mars in Virgo? So Mars represents sexuality, desire, get up and go, athleticism. Really, I can't stress this enough. The drive to go after what you desire, the ability to put in the work, the grunt work, the push, the determination. Mars can also represent, sexual desire, carnal desire. So Mars is a fiery planet. It represents cutting, burning, severing, sudden endings, sudden losses, calamities, catastrophes. So let's just go worst case scenario here. Mars is in your fourth house. Well, maybe your home burnt down. Maybe you had a sudden, Mars is in your 11th house. Maybe you had a sudden loss with your friends, a sudden falling out. Mars is the type of endings that come in with no warning and are come in with a bang. Mars is iron. Mars is the warrior. Mars is the military. Mars is the aggressive male. So Mars can represent like police officers and people in the military and that are governing authorities. So it is helpful to look at things from a psychological perspective, but it does give you much greater insight to also represent the greater archetype of Mars, the planet of war, because where Mars is in your chart, you'll be able to see you'll be able to get more insight. Like, let's say again, if you have Mars in the fourth house, well, maybe your father was in the military. If you have Mars in your first house, maybe you're meant to be in the military. Maybe you're meant to be an athlete. Maybe you're meant to be a governing authority. Or you're extremely accident prone. You get a lot of cuts and burns and bruises along the way. That's it for Mars. And then if we're looking at the sign that it's in, so let's say Mars rules Scorpio and Aries. That means that Mars is very, very, very happy there because Scorpio is water. So it's driven by the emotions. It's driven by its feelings. Whatever Scorpio wants, it has to feel it, has to really want it. And it will be strategic. and calculated, and it's going to think a lot about how it's going to get what it wants, and then it's going to go about it in a way that's not necessarily telling everyone what it's doing. But let's say your Mars is in Scorpio in the sixth house. You have a lot of energy that you need to get out on the daily. You need to be athletic. You need to be like going to the gym. Otherwise, the emotions are going to overpower you. If you have Mars in the ninth house, let's say Mars in Sagittarius in the ninth house, you have a lot of drive to think about broader concepts, to think about philosophies, to go to school, to travel to foreign places, to, being a governing authority like within a church or like any type of organized religion. So that's Mars. Now, because Mars can be helpful, right? Like we need to go after what we want. We need to have the ability to drive forward. If you have issues doing that, if you have a hard time getting up and going, maybe you have Mars in a sign that it's not happy in. So Mars would be pretty depressed in a sign like Cancer because Cancer is emotional and it's in the home of the moon and its desires are often changeable because it's ruled by the moon and the moon moves very quickly. It can mean that like sometimes that fire that you're looking for kind of gets squashed by all that water and it just doesn't have the like staying power that like Mars and Scorpio would because it's not a fixed sign, it's a cardinal sign, and cardinal will give you that little burst, but it's not going to give you much output in the end. Yeah, look at Mars as where in your chart and taking a ancient astrology perspective, think about the themes of cutting, loss, and severing and burning and see if those themes apply in the house that they're in. And like, Mars in the sixth house, did you have a heat related illness? Were you amputated? But just, I'm taking the worst case scenarios here, but I do find that putting those tangible textures on things really brings the chart to life. Now let's go to Jupiter. Let's make things a little bit happy. Okay, so Jupiter is the planet of luck, abundance, expansion, and growth. Jupiter says yes. It says yes, and it says yes, and do you want some more? Jupiter is the going to be the most positive planet if you're born during the day. And it's going to be a still positive, but not as positive as Venus if you're born during the night. So Jupiter, if we think of Jupiter, Jupiter is like a big, big roly-poly man who has a loud laugh and a booming voice and is friends with kings and has deep pockets that are filled with gold. And he loves to sit there and drink his wine and smoke his cigars. And he wants to talk about life and he wants to talk about all the travel that he's done and all the things that he's learned and all the places that he's seen. And he's going to give you all of his money because he's so generous. Jupiter is generous. So we're seeing this like archetype, this personality is really what an archetype means. This personality of this person who is larger than life, very gregarious, loves to think about broader concepts and is often friends of kings is like how ancient astrology will put it. So like Jupiter can like a Jupiter in a strong place or a prominent Jupiter in your chart can put you in positions of power. Like let's say Kim Kardashian. I know that she has a really prominent Jupiter. She's a Sagittarius rising. So, she did grow up like in an affluent neighborhood. Like she grew up, rubbing shoulders with like the Jacksons and Nicole Richie and Paris Hilton. So it's like that friendship, that Friends of Kings, even though that's so archaic now, it still lands, it still resonates. So when you're going to look at your chart, look at where Jupiter is and look at the house that it's in. And that's going to tell you where you will naturally find your luck and your abundance in life. If you have Jupiter in your seventh house of one-on-one relationships, your luck and abundance may come through having beautiful relationships or having a beautiful marriage. If Jupiter's in your 10th house, you may rise to great prominence in your career. your work will overflow. This is the thing with Jupiter is like it is positive, but because Jupiter doesn't know how to say no, it can create like a level of overconsumption that is difficult to manage at times. So Jupiter is also a planet of generosity. It shows where it pays to be generous, you know, where it pays to give back because you'll receive tenfold in return. Now that we've gone to the overly giving, overly generous, and beautiful Jupiter, let's go to its antidote, which is Saturn. So, if you're born at night, Saturn's going to be the most difficult planet. If you're born during the day, Saturn is going to represent surmountable challenges. Saturn is the granddaddy of the zodiac. Saturn is Father Kronos. Saturn is time, the ruler of time. Saturn is a grandfather. Saturn has connections to everything that's old. So, like, let's say if you have Saturn in your 10th house, your career may have to do with like old things. Saturn is the planet of limits and restrictions, and it will not give you what you want. If we're painting an archetype or painting a picture of this personality, Saturn is the granddad that tells you to put some elbow grease into it while you're cleaning the counter because you have to learn how to do the work. He's going to make sure that you get up at 5 a.m. to like go bale some hay and, do all the barn work chores, and he's gonna pay you like basically pennies, but one day you'll end up doing really well because Saturn taught you how to do the hard work. And because you learned how to do the hard work, you're going to benefit from that. Saturn is a planet where it's going to make it so that that area of your life, so the house that Saturn is in, things are probably not going to come easily in that house. Saturn is cool. Saturn is barren. Saturn says, find your limits, find your structures. And if you don't have them, that's going to be a problem. So, Saturn, let's say Saturn on a physical level represents bones and teeth and anything that's the framework of the body because Saturn rules structure. So, if you look at your birth chart, it's going to show you things that you're going to have to work a little bit harder to get what you want. Because Saturn has a connection to scarcity and being without. This can also show, times in your life where you didn't have a lot of money, places in your life where you just kind of went without. But wherever Saturn is, after 30 years, generally it does get better because it needs to take time to mature. People who are ruled by Saturn, so like Capricorn and Aquarius people, they often get better with age because in their youth they had to be so serious. And then as they get older, they can learn how to like let their hair down a little bit and they've benefited from everything that they've grown and developed for themselves. So again, look at the house that Saturn is in, and that's going to show you where things aren't going to be easy for you. Things aren't going to come perfectly. And look at the sign that it's in, and then you'll see like what you need to learn within that. So Saturn and Pisces, Pisces a water sign, Pisces loves without any limits. So the lesson of Saturn and Pisces is how do you set your boundaries? How do you navigate boundaries in a sign that just wants to flow freely? If Saturn is in Aries, maybe the lesson that you're going to learn in this lifetime is how to tame your impulsivity, how to work with your fire. What happens when you speak without thinking or you shoot first and then aim later? That's probably not going to work out well for you. And Saturn's going to make that painfully obvious. Now, just like personally, what I do find is that one connection that I've just noticed with Saturn is it will make sure that you are living authentically. So, again, look at the house that Saturn is in. And Saturn's going to ask you in that part of your life, whether it's in the seventh house of marriage or the 10th house of career, it's going to make it so painfully uncomfortable if you are living in a way that doesn't align with your truth. Are you with the wrong person? are you in the wrong career path? And are you in the wrong body? I've met a lot of people with Saturn in the first who are trans people, and that's been something that they've had to overcome is, or they've had to like, that's something they've had to work through is like figuring out their body and their identity, and does their body reflect their identity? So that's a really obvious example of figuring out your truth and figuring out how to live in it. So if you are a nighttime baby, Venus is going to be the most positive planet for you. If you're a daytime baby, Venus is going to be positive, but not as positive as Jupiter. Venus, my girl, I love her. I'm obviously heavy on the Venus placements, but if Venus were a person, well, she is a goddess. So she's the goddess of love and beauty and luxury and gold and wine and olives and kind of greasy food. And Venus is the planet of luxury and it's the planet of pleasure. That's why everything good in life is ruled by Venus, like art and I just love Venus. So, on more of a psychological level, more modern approach, Venus can represent what makes you likable. When people are like, oh, I really like this about you. So, let's say Venus is in Aries, and part of what your charm is that you're so direct and blunt and straightforward, and you go after what you want. If your Venus is in Libra, you're probably naturally pretty, naturally have good manners and are drawn to have a beautiful sense of aesthetics. If your Venus is in Cancer, maybe one thing someone loves about you is how nurturing you are, how you create such a beautiful home, how you create such a warm emotional space for people to land in, how you are like such a good cook. So Venus is how you what you find pleasurable and also probably what other people find pleasurable about you. Modern astrology will say that a man's Venus will show what he's looking for in his ideal partner, and a woman's Mars will show what she's looking for in her ideal partner. I'm I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I do see some levels of that. I see it more as Venus is the courtship and Mars is the primal connection. Mars is the sexual connection. Venus is the where are we going on the date? And Mars is like, how are we getting down after the date? Yeah, Venus is also the planet of creativity and art. That's all I really have to say about Venus. So now let's go to Mercury. Mercury is my homeboy. Mercury is androgynous. So my homeboy or my homegirl or my non-binary friend. Mercury is the element of androgyny or neither being good nor bad is so present in Mercury because I think in the tales, old Greek stories, like Mercury was one of the only gods that was able to travel into the underworlds and come back out again. So there is this element of androgyny, of not being good nor bad. People who are ruled by Mercury, they may end up being a little bit gay. Saturn people are also gay. Saturn is associated with queerness. But because Mercury is like two streams that could go any which way, I always associate that with queerness. And I just find a lot of my queer friends, and I mean, I'm queer, so I'm ruled by Mercury. So maybe I'm also just self-identifying there. Mercury is the planet of communication, intellect, learning, and what catches your mind, what you're thinking about. So let's say your Mercury's in the fifth house, you're constantly thinking about creative projects. Your Mercury's in your 10th house, you're constantly thinking about your career. Your Mercury's in your second house, you're constantly caught up in your finances and feelings of self-worth. Mercury's in the eighth house, you probably like some taboo topics, death, stuff that other people probably are a little bit disgusted by, to be honest. So Mercury shows how you learn and how you communicate. So if your Mercury is being aspected by Saturn, so like let's say if or if Mercury and Saturn are right next to each other and Mercury's in Pisces in the place of its fall, then maybe you had a learning disability or going to school and, your early education was really rough because of that disability, or you had a speech impediment. So Mercury also represents your voice, how your voice sounds, how you talk. So Beyonce and Leonardo DiCaprio, they both have such lovely speaking voices. Like I don't know about you, but I love like any video with Beyonce and she's just talking. I'm like, wow, girl, I could just go to sleep in the sound of your voice. Like it is just like a warm hug. She has Mercury in Libra. Libra again being aesthetically pleasing, so it sounds nice. Someone with a Mercury in Aries is going to be very like brash and have like probably a really loud voice. Same with Mercury in Sagittarius. So yeah, Mercury shows how you learn, how you think, and how you communicate. Mercury also represents markets, like mercantile. I'm not sure if that's actually the root of that word, but it would make so much sense to me if it was. But markets and attention to detail and little things and people who have a lot of Mercury placements are connected to diviners because Mercury is the god of the messenger god. So diviners, prophets, oracles, seekers of mystic lore is often associated with Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. Venus and Jupiter are also associated with money. So guys, that's an introduction to the traditional planets and some key planets in your birth chart. I left out Pluto and Uranus and Neptune because they're outer planets and they weren't discovered until much later. And because they move much slower around the Earth, that they often have more of a generational impact than, and there is a personal impact as well, but they are more generational. And I just wanted this to be more personal with a connection to all the personal planets. So I hope you learned something today. I hope the big, vast world of astrology kind of became more understandable. And let me know. I would love to hear your chart interpretations for yourself. What does your chart say about you? And does it resonate? Does it not? Please leave a comment in the review in the comments. I would love to know. Also, if you could please like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube, to my Spotify, to my Apple, wherever you listen to your podcasts, please, boost me. I need all the help I can get here. I'm like mostly kidding, but I'm actually not. If you would like to book a reading with me, go to www.rileyadair.com and we'll do a deep dive into your birth chart and what it says about you and your life experiences. You can follow me on Instagram at RileyAdair111, TikTok at AstroRy94. But yeah, please like, comment, and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.